The Galactic Council had always been the epitome of cosmic power, a governing body comprised of the most ancient and influential species scattered across the far reaches of the universe. For millennia, the Council had maintained an air of invincibility, making decisions that dictated the fate of entire galaxies. The beings that sat at its table were of incomprehensible power, many existing in forms unimaginable to mortal minds. Some were ethereal, existing as pure energy, others were massive, towering structures of sentient organic matter, some were able to transcend space-time itself. To them, the concept of humanity, a species barely crawling out of its planetary cradle, was laughable at best. For eons, the Galactic Council had ruled without challenge. It operated in a delicate balance, its members bound by tradition and protocol, with each decision taking years of debate and deliberation. These debates, though necessary for maintaining the structure of power, were often seen by the Council members as tedious formalities, a necessary evil to preserve their dominance. Humanity had never even been considered for membership, dismissed as too primitive, too volatile, too human. However, that all changed when an unexpected crisis forced the Council into a corner. The Varkan, an ancient and expansionist species with technology far beyond the reach of most known races, began destabilizing the outer rim of the galaxy. Their raids were swift, merciless, and calculated, devastating entire star systems with their technologically advanced weapons and ruthless efficiency. The Council, once known for its ability to govern with unwavering authority, found itself unable to act. Their fragmented structure, filled with ancient rivalries and outdated methods, was ill-suited to handle a threat of such magnitude. In desperation, the Council voted to include an additional member, Earth's representative, a human. The decision was met with widespread disdain and confusion among the Council's elite. Why, after all, would they give a seat to a species so young, so untested, so inferior in every sense? But the threat of the Varkan left the Council no choice. Earth was elected as a desperate measure, not because of any intrinsic value humanity brought to the table, but because of its strategic position and the need for fresh thinking in the face of an existential crisis. General Marcus Lorian was chosen as Earth's representative. He was a soldier, a leader, a man whose tactical mind had been honed through countless battles on the far-flung edges of human space. His reputation as an unorthodox strategist, willing to do whatever it took to win, had earned him both admiration and fear among his peers. It was not his political acumen that the Council was after, but his experience in dealing with impossible odds. The Varkan were an unprecedented threat, and humanity's most potent weapon, it seemed, was its resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Marcus was, by all accounts, a perfect fit for the role, pragmatic, blunt, and absolutely unafraid of confronting those who saw themselves as the universe's elite. Marcus's arrival at the Council was met with skepticism at best and outright hostility at worst. He was ushered into a chamber that appeared as a cold, sterile expanse of intricate geometric patterns, a space that was both unsettling and imposing. The Council members, beings whose mere presence filled the room with a strange, almost tangible energy, regarded him with a mixture of contempt and bemusement. Their eyes, or whatever passed for them, locked onto him with an expression that seemed to say, "What could this mortal have to offer?" The alien representative's disdain was palpable. An insectoid species, towering and armored, tilted its head and studied Marcus as if he were an insect under a magnifying glass. A telepathic energy being, its form a pulsating mass of light and dark, shifted and rippled, sending waves of discomfort through the room. One of the more humanoid members, a being whose face was half covered in translucent armor, sneered openly. Marcus felt the weight of their judgment, but he showed no sign of fear. He wasn't here to beg for respect, he was here because humanity had earned its place. Asterisk a human, asterisk the insectoid's voice sounded like the chittering of thousands of tiny claws scraping against stone. Do you believe your species is worthy of this seat? You are nothing more than a fleeting flash in the universe's history. Marcus met its gaze, unfazed. I believe the galaxy could use a little more flash, then. How else would you expect to get things done? You've been sitting here, debating, for millennia, and the Varkan are wiping out entire systems. You might have all the time in the universe, but I don't. The energy being hummed ominously, its shifting form twisting in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. You speak with the arrogance of one who believes they can accomplish what others have failed to achieve. Your species is no more than a blip in the grand timeline of existence. A wry smile crept across Marcus's face. Maybe. But in a galaxy of ancient empires and stagnation, a blip like me might just be the catalyst for something worth remembering. You may be here for millennia, but humanity, we're here to act. The council murmured among themselves, some intrigued, others dismissive. They were accustomed to centuries-long deliberations and long-winded treaties. Their methods of governance were rooted in the slow, meticulous machinery of tradition. They were not prepared for someone like Marcus, a human who didn't see value in years of indecision, who didn't care about standing on ceremony. He had a reputation as someone who would do whatever it took to get results, even if that meant breaking every rule of decorum the council held sacred. But as the debate continued, it became clear that Marcus's presence was no longer a joke. Despite their disdain, despite their attempts to undermine him, it was impossible to ignore the fact that his species had survived the impossible time and time again. Humanity, after all, was known throughout the galaxy for one thing: perseverance. It was that same determination that had propelled Marcus to this position, and it was the key to his success here as well. As the council continued to argue among themselves, Marcus took a step back and studied the room. He could see the cracks in their facade, the weaknesses they were too proud to acknowledge. This wasn't a body of enlightened rulers, it was a fractured institution, full of rivalries, outdated methods, and petty disagreements. The Varkin weren't the real threat. The real danger was their inability to act when action was required. "Let me put it this way," Marcus said, cutting through the noise of debate. "You can continue sitting here, talking in circles, and the Varkin will wipe you all out. Or, you can listen to me, and maybe, just maybe, humanity can give you the firepower you need to win. Your call." Silence followed his words, heavy and tense. The members of the council exchanged glances, some wary, others intrigued. But it was clear, the era of stagnation had come to an end. Humanity had entered the arena, and it was here to stay. The next few days were a whirlwind of disbelief and hostility. The members of the Galactic Council, despite their towering intellect and godlike power, could not shake the uncomfortable truth that humanity had secured a seat among them. To many, the very idea was insulting, a betrayal of millennia of careful, painstaking hierarchy. The notion that a human, a species with such limited experience and primitive instincts, could even begin to understand the intricacies of galactic politics was laughable. And yet, there Marcus stood, an unflinching human in the heart of their deliberations, offering solutions they couldn't even begin to fathom. Marcus was aware of the scorn directed his way, but he was also acutely aware of one crucial fact: he didn't need their approval. His seat on the council wasn't a formality, it was an opportunity for humanity to prove its worth. If they wanted to treat him like an outsider, so be it. He had no time for niceties or diplomacy that didn't lead to action. For the first few days, his presence was met with muted attempts at education. Diplomats from various species attempted to enlighten Marcus on the fine points of galactic law, treaty obligations, and the centuries-old intricacies of power. They spoke in terms of bureaucracy that were completely foreign to him, using jargon so convoluted it might as well have been a different language entirely. Their speeches were long, drawn-out affairs, meant more to assert their intellectual superiority than to address any real issue. But Marcus didn't care about the subtlety of their arguments. He had been trained to think in terms of direct, decisive action. The way the council functioned, with its endless debates and slow-moving bureaucracy, frustrated him. In the military, they'd teach you that every moment wasted was a risk, someone out there would be making moves, and if you didn't act fast enough, you'd lose the initiative. The Varkin were not waiting around for them to finish discussing the finer points of ancient treaties. They were out there, razing entire colonies to the ground, and all the council could do was argue over the semantics of the past. Finally, Marcus couldn't take it any longer. During one particularly tedious debate over the Varkin threat, where members of the council were still quibbling over which race should take responsibility for dealing with the invaders, Marcus stood up. The silence in the room was immediate. Enough. His voice rang out across the chamber, drawing the attention of every representative in the room. The insectoid creature, still perched high above the table, turned its head toward him with a glare of distaste. You want to talk about treaties and politics? Marcus continued, his voice steady but with an edge of steel. I don't have time for that. The Varkan are already hitting outlying systems. Your bureaucratic games aren't going to save anyone. You need action, not more talks about ancient rights and wrongs. The council members stared at him in stunned silence. It wasn't just the words that shocked them, it was the boldness with which he spoke. Marcus Lorian, a mere human, had the gall to lecture the most powerful beings in the galaxy on how to do their job. The Varkan didn't come here to negotiate, Marcus said, pacing slowly before the assembly. They came to wipe us out. And while we're all sitting here debating whose job it is to stop them, they're tearing through our colonies. We don't need more politics, we need results. His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. There was no denying it. The council had failed to take action, and now it was up to Marcus to show them that humans, with all their perceived imperfections, could do what the most ancient species of the galaxy had failed to accomplish. His reputation as a military tactician had preceded him, but now it was time to prove it on a much larger stage. There was a pause, a long, almost uncomfortable silence, as the representatives of the various species mulled over Marcus's words. The humanoid representative, still hidden behind layers of translucent armor, was the first to speak. You are bold, human, it said, its voice cold but not without some begrudging respect. But you do not understand the complexities of this situation. The Varkan are no mere foe. Their weapons are capable of wiping entire star systems off the map. Then we need to stop fighting like bureaucrats and start fighting like soldiers, Marcus snapped. You've been in a stalemate for so long that you don't even know how to act anymore. Humanity might not have your advanced technology, your lifetimes of wisdom, but we know one thing: when we're faced with an enemy, we don't waste time. A ripple of unease swept through the room. Several of the representatives were clearly uncomfortable with the way Marcus was challenging their authority, but they couldn't deny the force of his argument. The Varkan weren't a problem that could be solved with diplomatic gestures or long-winded resolutions, they were an immediate, lethal threat. And Marcus wasn't going to let them waste any more time. Fine, said the energy being, its form shimmering slightly in the air. What do you propose, human? Marcus didn't hesitate. He already had a plan, simple, direct, and rooted in the kind of unorthodox thinking that had made humanity the force it was. First, he said, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade, we stop pretending the old methods will work. We set up a unified strike force, using guerrilla tactics, fast, mobile, unpredictable. We don't need to match the Varkan's firepower. We need to outsmart them, hit them where they don't expect it. And how do you intend to do that? Asked the humanoid representative, a touch of skepticism in its voice. By using what they don't understand about us, Marcus replied. We have something none of you do, unpredictability. We're a species that has survived through chaos, through constant adversity. We don't think the way you do. We don't have centuries of tradition or stagnant thinking holding us back. When humanity faces a threat, we improvise. We adapt. And we win. The room fell silent again. The words "we win" echoed in the chamber like a challenge, reverberating against the cold walls. The representatives exchanged uneasy glances. They had long prided themselves on their ability to calculate and predict, to solve problems through deliberation and reason. But Marcus was asking them to do something different. He was asking them to throw aside centuries of calculated wisdom in favor of something raw, something untamed. The human way. I propose a raid on the Varkan's supply line, Marcus continued, his voice rising in intensity. We use their arrogance against them. While they focus on their front lines, we hit them where it hurts. Their supply depots, their fleet reserves, their supply lines. We break their momentum. We force them into a corner. One of the more ancient members, a being of swirling dark matter, spoke up, its voice filled with suspicion. This is reckless. You suggest we risk our fleets on a human plan? Risk? What we're doing now is the real risk, Marcus shot back, his eyes narrowing. Sitting here, bickering about what should have been done yesterday, you want to save this galaxy? You have to move. The room was now filled with the tension of impending decisions. The ancient beings, who had lived through countless ages, were at a crossroads. Marcus had pushed them past their old ways, forcing them to acknowledge that their slow, methodical approach might not be enough to confront the immediate threat they now faced. The clock was ticking, and humanity, with all its imperfections and arrogance, had brought them to the edge of action. The council's hesitation lingered, but the cold silence was finally broken by the high-ranking member from the Galactic species, whose ice-like form shimmered as it shifted its weight, its crystalline eyes locking onto Marcus with a careful yet critical gaze. You speak of audacity, human, the Galactic said, its voice a sharp, hollow sound like wind through frozen caverns. But this is not mere bravado. This is a galactic war. You suggest that we abandon centuries of diplomatic protocol for reckless military action. You must be more specific. Marcus didn't flinch, meeting its gaze with steely resolve. The Varkin won't give us time for diplomacy. You know that as well as I do. Our only option is to strike, fast and hard, and if it fails, we try again. We adapt. That's what we do. There was a long pause. The Galactic's expression remained unreadable, but behind its icy facade, there was a flicker of something, perhaps the faintest hint of realization that Marcus's plan was the only one that had any chance of working. The bureaucratic games were over. The council had to act or be left behind. Human, I will not deny the urgency of your words, the Galactic finally said. But you must understand the delicate balance we maintain. We cannot afford to act impulsively. The Varkin have no such hesitation, Marcus shot back. They will raise every outpost we have. Your delicate balance will be nothing but ash if we don't move. As the tension thickened, Marcus felt his words begin to settle, taking root in the minds of his fellow representatives. The energy being spoke next, its voice as ethereal as the shifting currents of space itself. The humans do indeed adapt quickly, it murmured. Perhaps there's merit in their unpredictability. The question remains, how do you propose to lead this strike, human? Without missing a beat, Marcus laid out his plan in precise, clinical detail. It wasn't elaborate or overly technical. The beauty of it lay in its simplicity. He would coordinate with various star systems' defense fleets, providing a mix of guerrilla-style tactics and surprise attacks to strike the Varkan's most vulnerable supply points. Human forces would hit fast and disappear before the Varkan could retaliate. The Council's fleets would remain in reserve, ready to engage if necessary. The plan was designed to exploit the Varkan's weaknesses, attacking their logistics and forcing them to overextend. We'll hit them where they're weakest, Marcus continued, his tone unyielding. I have no intention of losing lives recklessly, but we can't wait for a perfect moment that may never come. The longer we wait, the more ground the Varkan will take. We have to act now. The insectoid representative, whose antennae twitched nervously at the mention of military action, leaned forward. But you ask us to gamble with lives. To risk our fleets without certainty of success. And what's the alternative? Marcus countered, his gaze locking onto the insectoids. More talks? More analysis? Do you think the Varkan will stop because we sign a peace treaty or make another diplomatic gesture? They don't care about treaties. They care about domination. If we don't move quickly, there will be no fleets left to risk. Another long silence followed, broken only by the occasional hum of alien energy fields swirling above their heads. The weight of Marcus's words hung in the air, almost suffocating. For all their power, their wisdom, their centuries of experience, the ancient species of the Galactic Council were being forced to confront something they had long forgotten, the human capacity for action, for urgency, and for risk. Finally, the humanoid from the Heloid system, whose radiant form had been obscured behind an array of shimmering shields, spoke. Its voice was rich with centuries of leadership but tempered by a newfound understanding. You are right, human, it said, nodding slowly. We have been complacent. We have become so concerned with our own preservation that we forgot what it means to fight. You have reminded us of that. The insectoid representative, visibly uncomfortable but acknowledging the truth of the statement, shifted its weight. Perhaps we do need to rethink our approach. You may be right. But your methods are untested, human. Marcus leaned in, locking eyes with the insectoid. Then let's test them. At that, the tension in the room seemed to break. The council's members, those who had spent lifetimes negotiating in sterile chambers and behind carefully constructed facades, were being faced with a new reality. A reality where direct action mattered more than endless deliberations. They had been forced out of their complacency by a single human, a representative of a species they had long considered beneath them. "All right," the Galatian said, its voice quieter now, almost reluctant. "We'll give you this, human. We will act on your terms." Marcus didn't allow himself a moment of celebration. There was no time. The council had agreed, but the execution of the plan was the next hurdle. The Varkin didn't care about council decisions or the sudden change of strategy. They were moving fast, and every second counted. The next few hours were a blur of communication. Marcus quickly began organizing the various fleets and defense units that had been scattered throughout the galaxy, using every resource available to him. The first phase of the operation was a massive diversion, a series of coordinated strikes on multiple fronts to keep the Varkin guessing, to make them think they were being attacked from all sides. Marcus knew that once the Varkin became too disoriented, it would give the human forces the perfect opportunity to strike their supply lines. By the time the plan was put into motion, Marcus had successfully convinced the more hesitant members of the council to commit fully. The fleets assembled, and the first wave of strikes hit Varkin positions. It was chaos, but it was the kind of chaos that humans thrived in. The council members watched, some in disbelief, others in reluctant admiration, as Marcus's plan unfolded. The Varkin responded as expected, blinded by the sudden barrage of attacks from multiple points. They had underestimated humanity's ability to coordinate such a diverse, chaotic strike, and for the first time in months, the Varkin faltered. They were scrambling, and Marcus knew this was their one chance to finish the job. It wasn't perfect. There were risks. But Marcus had no intention of playing it safe. His people had never been known for playing by the rules of others. The human way wasn't about waiting for permission, it was about taking action when it mattered most. As the attack on the Varkin supply lines began, the council sat in silence, realizing that they had just witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented. Humans, with all their supposed flaws, had proven themselves capable of something the ancient species had long forgotten, the ability to act when it counted, and to succeed against overwhelming odds. The tide had turned. But this was just the beginning. The true test lay ahead. The day after the mission had ended, the results were undeniable. The Varkin, once confident in their unstoppable advance, were now on the defensive. Their supply chains, critical to their war effort, had been devastated. The human strike had been a resounding success, disruptive, swift, and precise. It wasn't flawless, but it had forced the Varkin to rethink their position. For the first time, they were no longer the ones dictating the terms of engagement. Marcus stood before the Galactic Council, his posture straight, his expression resolute. The once doubtful representatives, the species who had first questioned humanity's place among them, were now watching him with a mixture of awe and concern. Their previous disbelief was now replaced with an uncomfortable understanding that humanity had proven itself to be more than capable. The tide of war had shifted, and it had done so because of a species they had dismissed as primitive not long ago. "Congratulations, General Lorian," the energy being spoke first, its voice echoing in a soft, undulating wave. "You have succeeded beyond even our expectations." The Varkin are reeling. "But you know as well as we do that this victory is but the first step. What happens next will decide everything." Marcus nodded. He had anticipated this. The Varkin were not a simple threat that could be eradicated with a single operation. They were cunning, relentless, and would adapt. This victory had been a crucial first move, but it was far from the endgame. The next phase will require coordination, Marcus said, his voice firm. We've bought ourselves time, but the Varkin won't simply retreat. They'll come back stronger, more focused. We need to capitalize on this moment, continue disrupting their command structures, hit them where they least expect it. The Galatian, whose icy demeanor had shifted ever so slightly, nodded thoughtfully. You suggest we hit their command centers directly? That would be risky. Their leadership is well guarded. Risk is a part of the game, Marcus replied. If we sit back and wait for the Varkan to regroup, we'll lose this advantage. We need to keep them off balance. Their leadership isn't invincible, no matter how much they like to believe it. The insectoid representative, whose chitinous armor seemed to shimmer as if processing every word, clicked its mandibles in thought. You've shown that your people are more than capable of pulling off these tactics, human. But you are asking us to commit to further risks. You must realize that the council will be judged on this. Marcus's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with the weight of responsibility. I'm not asking for blind support. I'm asking you to understand that we are in a situation where hesitation is the enemy. The Varkin will not wait for us to make up our minds. They are already planning their next move. If we don't act, it will be too late. The humanoid from the heloid system leaned forward, its radiant form flickering as it gathered energy from the surrounding space. I understand the gravity of your words, General. The humans are bold. You are unorthodox, but effective. We will continue with your plan. But know this, the path you set us on will not be easy. Marcus's lips curved into a brief, knowing smile. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for results. As the council members gave their consent, there was a sense of reluctant admiration growing in the room. The once cynical voices had softened. Marcus had succeeded in convincing them. He had turned the tide, not just in the war, but in the way the council viewed humanity. Where they had once seen a species capable only of primitive violence and short-sighted tactics, they now saw something else entirely. Something dangerous. The council meeting adjourned, but the weight of Marcus's new role was far from over. His every decision now carried the potential to reshape the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Humanity had been granted a seat at the table, but that seat came with a heavy burden. In the coming weeks, the Varkin retaliated, but their strikes were more cautious, more calculated. They had learned from their initial blunder, but Marcus was always one step ahead. He had the advantage of unpredictability, the one thing the ancient species of the Council had long since lost. The new alliances Marcus had forged within the Council came with both benefits and challenges. The diplomatic landscape had shifted. The more he navigated the intricacies of galactic politics, the clearer it became that the biggest threat wasn't the Varkan. It was the jealousy of the other Council members. Species that had once ruled unchallenged now saw humanity's rise as a direct threat to their status. Some began to plot against the human representative, hoping to drive a wedge between Marcus and the more influential members of the Council. Marcus wasn't blind to the growing animosity. He knew it was only a matter of time before the political tides turned. His success had forced the Galactic Council to change, but it had also made him a target. To survive, he would need to be just as skilled in diplomacy as he was in military strategy. But he had something none of the other council members had: human resolve. His species didn't back down when faced with adversity, they adapted. They learned. And they fought, tooth and nail, for what they believed in. As the days passed, Marcus continued to push for human involvement in every critical decision the council faced. He made sure that Earth's interests were always at the forefront of every discussion. He cultivated allies within the council, using the same tactics that had won him the war with the Varkan: strategy, timing, and an unwavering belief in the potential of humanity. Despite the political maneuvering, Marcus's reputation continued to grow. His influence spread, and more species began to look to him for guidance. It wasn't just humanity they trusted, it was his ability to think outside the box, to push boundaries, and to turn the impossible into something achievable. The other species in the galaxy had their strengths, but they lacked one crucial thing: the willingness to take risks, to act when others hesitated. And that was humanity's true gift. In a galaxy that had grown stagnant in its power struggles, humanity had become the spark of change. Marcus had no illusions about what lay ahead. The political games would continue, and new threats would emerge. But he wasn't concerned about what others thought of him anymore. He was focused on one thing: ensuring that humanity's place in the galaxy remained secure. As he left the council chamber that day, the weight of his decisions heavy on his shoulders, he couldn't help but think of the path ahead. Humanity had made its mark. But the real question was, what would they do with it? The galaxy had learned that humans could adapt. But what the galaxy didn't know yet was that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its ability to survive, but in its ability to change the very nature of the game.